Section 20 of 11 Stories by Henry Hasse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Cinda J. M. One Purple Hope. Part 1. Once he had been a tall, straight spaceman, free as the galaxies. Now Joe Latham was a Chisith addict, a beachcomber at Venusport. Maybe he'd get one last chance. His sleep-drugged mind was slow to respond. He was lying face down, he knew that, and he ought to get up. If he didn't get up, he would drown. Something hot and heavy like a huge hand was pressing him deeper into the brackish mire. He pondered. Perhaps it were better to drown? For a moment, he allowed himself the luxury of the thought, then decided against it. Plenty of time later for drowning. First, there was something he had to do. So it was that Joel Latham, Earthman, age 30, occupation space drifter, avocation to Sith drinker, awakened on this most momentous of mornings. Moaning in protest, he slowly rolled himself over. The sun slapped him hard against the eyes. He blinked against the pain and saw that he was still in Venusport. Rather, he was at the edge of the swamp near the sprawling compound. Overhead, the ionic field was aglow, humming softly, beating back the obscurant mists. He managed to stand up. Some of the pallid-faced squeals out in the swamp stopped their work to stare at him. Latham grimaced. Every fiber of him, especially his brain, seemed to have been squeezed dry. Then it came. He felt it coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The hammering nausea took him suddenly about the middle, bending him double. "I'm an Earthman," Joel Latham groaned aloud. That was invariably the first reaction of the Chisith hound, at least with terrestrials, who indulged in the deadly stuff, a piteous protest half in defiance, half in despair. The nausea reached up through his stomach, through his chest, and into his throat. It became more than nausea. It grew thorns that stabbed inwardly, jagged edges that sawed away at his brain with a terrible need. He fell forward on hands and knees, and that's when he saw the little Martian who crouched a few feet away watching him. "I went through mine a few minutes ago," the Martian said in a monotone. "Yours will go away presently." "I know. It will. Been through this before." "Obviously you have. Many times." Many times was an understatement, Latham thought wretchedly, but this was one of the worst ones. Even worse than that time on Callisto. Thinking about it didn't help. He turned his gaze back to the Martian. That didn't help either. Most Martians are lean and brown and ugly. This one was that and more. What had once been clothes were tattered and spattered with swamp mud. The hair was a wisp, the teeth only a memory. The skin was tight and leathery across the bony structure of the face, the eyes distended and yellow, the unmistakable sign of a Chisith hound. Latham grimaced, managed to grind out, "Do I look as bad as you?" "Worse," the little Martian was matter of fact. "I believe you." He looked long and hard at the Martian. "I remember you now. Name's Quilo. You were with me last night." Quilo grinned, showing the stumps of yellowish teeth. "Correction. 4 nights ago. That's when it began." Latham climbed to his feet. The reaction was going away, but there was still a dull apathy about his brain. Just to think was an aching effort. 4 days, he muttered. "How'd I come here?" "So, you don't remember that? You came on the pleasure yacht. The one from Turabek." Turabek. Latham was remembering now. Turabek, capital city of Venus, far on the other side of the planet. He'd had a small stake and was lucky at the gaming tables. Before that, it was Callisto, where he'd struck it rich in the iridium fields. Anyway, rich enough to keep him supplied with Chisith for a year. Before Callisto, it had been Mars. He had worked the rocket rooms of Jovian freighters. He had served as tourist guide in the dark little streets of Ganymede City, and when fortune was lowest, he'd begged in those streets and done worse things than begging. Before that, he couldn't remember. He went wherever whim and fortune took him, but the whims were short-lived, and the fortune invariably ended at the bottom of a glass. The deadly Tasith twisted his brain awry and took its toll and drove him on. He'd been on the beach, on half a dozen planets. Earth he shunned. He hadn't set foot there in more years than he could remember. At first it was because he was ashamed, but even that was gone now. Only a cold sickness was left in the soul of Joe Latham. He stared at his fellow Tasith hound, this shell of a Martian, and said, "What happened last night?" "What always happens," Quilo said wearily. "We used up all our credit. Penger kicked us out." It took Joel Latham a full minute to absorb that piece of information. Mixed up with the agony in his eyes was a pensive look, but no resentment. His need just now was too dire for resentment. He stared across the swamp at the outpost's straggling street. Jake Penger was the law here, and he owned the only supply of Tasith. Latham recalled him vaguely, a huge man, inscrutable, uncompromising. "Penger," he muttered. "That's it. I knew there was something I was going to do." "What were you going to do?" Quilo moved in closer, a sudden light of interest in his eyes. "See Penger, of course." "Why?" "I need Tasith, and I'm going to need it worse before this day's over." Quilo's eyes went dull again. "We both do. How do you think you're going to manage it?" "I'll show you. Never let it be said that Joel Latham was helpless in face of an emergency." With unsteady fingers, he began a search of his clothes, and that's when the final realization descended upon Joel Latham. These weren't his clothes. Not the ones he had when he came here. He stared into the Martian's mango-like face. "I had a lucky piece. An ancient Demian jewel set in platinum. It's always been good for credit." Quilo's sigh was like a wind through withered leaves. "That," he said, "was used up 2 nights ago." "I had a disc gun, too. What happened to it?" "We used that up last night. Penger allowed us 4 drinks apiece for it." Latham nodded miserably. "The space yacht, I guess it's already gone?" 2 days ago, your fine feathered friends shunned you when they learned you were Tasith hound, but I stuck by you," Quilo added cunningly. Latham sank heavily into a clump of swamp grass. He stared at his right hand. It had started trembling. He couldn't stop the trembling. He wondered dully if he was frightened or if it was a result of the terrible craving that twisted and writhed within him. He stared up into the Martian's face. "Stranded," he said weakly. "But I'll get out of here. I'll hire out on one of the freighters." "You won't." Quilo's voice was matter-of-fact again. "Not when they learn you're a Tasith hound. And Penger, we'll let them know, you can bet on that. He's a devil, that Penger." "But he's an Earthman. And I'm an Earthman." Latham's voice was almost a wail. His soul was withering within him. "Tell Penger that and see what he answers you. You're on the beach, my friend. You've been there before, but this is the final beach. The swamp side of Venus. And here you'll stay until Penger is ready to let you go. I've been here 5 years. Joel Latham put his head in his hands and tried to think. Quilo's voice droned on. You'll work for Penger. You'll work in the swamps. An Earthman, a Martian, a Ganymedian can do 10 times the work of one of these squeals. He gestured at the pallid-faced low Venusians who moved listlessly through the mud, pulling up the draanga weed. You'll work for the amount of Tasith Penger portions out to you, and glad to get it. At the word Tasith, Latham's head came up. The dawning fear was gone from his eyes. All right, I'll do it. But only for a while, mind you. I'll find a way out of this. I'm getting back to the iridium fields on Callisto. He plunged wildly into the mud and sank to his waist. But it was the thought of Tasith that drove him on, not Callisto. Coelho stood by and watched, a thin, knowing smile creasing his leathery lips. A sort of frenzy had come upon Joel Latham. He tore at the stubborn dranga weed and brought it up, dripping, tossing the long lengths across his shoulder. He knew of this stuff. When properly synthesized, dranga weed had a medicinal value on the various planets. Penger shipped it out 4 times a year at a neat little profit. Latham moved on. A yellowish fog had come down, the dreaded ignis fatui. Unless one kept moving, decomposition of the blood set in, essential salts within the body were dissolved, and cellular activity ceased. Latham grinned wryly. He doubted if it could touch him. There was so much to sith within his alchemy. Nevertheless, he moved and worked ceaselessly. He could see that caricature of a Martian standing back there watching. Then it happened. The thing happened, which was to prove both a promise and a despair. Joel Latham felt a hardness at his heel, an irritating lump inside his neoprene boot. He moved back to higher ground, lifted his foot from the mire, and removed the boot. He shook something out into his hand. It was round and hard and shiny, perhaps an inch in diameter. He held it aloft between thumb and forefinger. The filtering sunlight struck it and sent back lambent fires. Joel Latham stared and gasped, felt his senses reeling. "Purple!" he sobbed. "A purple Josmian!" He was clambering back toward Coelho, forgetting the sweat in his eyes and the insufferable heat. He held the thing aloft. "Look at it!" he sobbed again. "Look at it shine! Look at the size!" Coelho was indeed looking. His yellowish eyes bulged. "A Josmian," he whispered. "We've struck it rich." Joel Latham regarded the little caricature with astonishment. Something of sanity came back to Joel Latham. "We?" he said. "I found it. It's mine. I never knew you until 4 days ago." "But I stood by you," the Martian wailed. "Your friends deserted you, but I stood by you. Aren't we partners?" Latham considered that. "No," he decided. "You stood by me as long as I had credit for Tasith. Until my money and lucky piece and disc gun and clothes were gone. Did you offer to help me out there?" He waved at the swamp. "This Josmian is going to get me back to Callisto. Penger ought to give me plenty for it." What happened next was too swift for Latham's reeling senses. A claw-like hand darted out. Coelho snatched the Josmian. His other hand swung around and caught Latham hard across the throat, sending him back into the swamp, where he staggered for a moment and sat down abruptly. "Hey!" Latham protested. "Hey! Look here!" But the Martian was scuttling away like a huge fiddler crab, the Josmian clutched in one scrawny fist. Joel Latham came slowly up out of the mud, shaking his head and grinning stupidly. It was very unkind of Coelho to treat him like this. He watched the Martian's departing figure. He made no effort to follow, not at once. Not until a strange new emotion, part frustration and part despair, rose up in his breast, and close upon that, the dawning realization that he was being cheated of a last hope. Even then he didn't hurry. He followed Coelho, swinging along in slow, loping strides, but not gaining. He felt weak and sick. That jagged need for Tasith was again sawing away at his entrails. His feet tangled in the outlying swamp grass. He plunged headlong and picked himself up. Coelho was heading for higher ground, away from the compound. Coelho was yelling as he ran. Latham wondered why the devil he was yelling. Then, some distance ahead, Latham could see a third man lifting himself from the ground. The Jovian. Suddenly Latham remembered him. The Jovian had been with them last night, too. Now Coelho was tugging at the man, yelling, showing him the Josmian. The Jovian hoisted his bulk erect, turned and waited for Latham, grinning broadly. The grin didn't fool Latham. All Jovians grinned. Some of them grinned while breaking a man's vertebrae. This was one of the big ones, Latham noticed, and he was ugly, with long, reaching arms and wiry hair and a face that looked as if he'd slept in it. Latham stopped just short of him and reached out a hand. I want the Josmian, said Joel Latham. The Jovian came a step forward. You leave Quilo alone. Quilo, he's my friend. I'm going to have that Josmian, said Joel Latham. The Jovian thrust out a huge fist with amazing speed. Latham caught at it and hung on grimly. The Jovian brought his other hand around in an arc that caught the Earthman across the face, sent him sprawling 10 feet away. Josmian belongs to us now. You leave us alone. Joel Latham sat there wiping blood from his face, watching the bestial pair as they headed around the compound and into the matted jungle. His last glimpse, just before darkness swallowed them up, was of Quilo grinning gleefully back at him. Latham sighed. He stood up. The blow had shaken some of the resolve out of him. He turned east, northeast, east by north, like a compass on a binge. Then he saw Penjer watch him from the outer gate of the compound. Apparently Penjer had seen it all. Latham turned and ran toward Jake Penjer. You saw them, Latham wailed. You saw it. They stole my Josmian. You've got to stop them. Penjer planted his feet wide apart and surveyed the sniveling Earthmen. Penjer's dark face was hard-cut and impassive. He'd seen these Sith hounds before. They came here and died here. He hated them all. Penjer said, They did what? The Josmian, the purple Josmian. I found it, and they stole it from me. You've got to help me, Penjer. Penjer said, You're crazy. But I found it, I tell you. A big one. I'll sell it to you, Penjer. Penjer said, You're crazy with Sith? There hasn't been a Josmian found in this swamp for 10 years. Penjer, listen to me. Penjer said, Forget it. You want Sith? You'll have Sith. But you'll work, and you'll work hard. You'll get the Dranga weed out. Penjer, I'm an Earthman. I'm asking you, is one Earthman to another? Latham stopped. He shivered. He looked into Penjer's colorless eyes, and what he saw made his soul curl up within him. You're a what? An Earthman? You were an Earthman. Now you're a grubby little specimen of the genus Sith. You're a miserable, whining little speck of matter wriggling toward the final transfixion. In another year, you won't even be that. You'll be dead and forgotten. Don't come crawling to me talking about Earthmen. The voice scraped across Latham's naked nerve ends. Penjer's eyes blazed, and in his trembling anger, he almost raised a fist. Latham cringed away. From out of his forgotten past, something came to Latham. He stared at the loom of the jungle where Quilo and the Jovian had disappeared. I've seen the day, he complained miserably, when they wouldn't get away with this. You've seen the day, period. I'm asking you once more, Penjer, help me. At least give me back the disc gun. The disc gun? Now what would you want with the disc gun? You'd only come trading it back to me. You bring in the Dranga weed. That's all I'm interested in. And if you work especially hard, there'll be some Sith. Enough for your needs. Latham's eyes went fever bright. His lips writhed back. A fit of trembling took possession of his limbs. Almost he succumbed to the immediate vision of the Sith. Almost he forgot about the Josmian. But somewhere deep in his alchemy was a well of stubbornness he never knew he possessed. He clutched at Penjer's sleeve as the man turned away. He found himself screaming, Then I'll go without the gun. I'm going to get that Josmian, do you hear? You'll believe me then. You'll believe me when you see it, Penjer. Penjer shook him away. Sure. You bring me a Josmian, then we'll talk a deal. He wanted to ask for a drink. Just one drink of Sith right now. But Latham had learned the essential fact that there could be no compromising with this man. He reeled away. His brief outburst had left him weak and trembling. Nevertheless, he went stumbling toward the looming wall of the jungle. He heard Penjer's voice, a little annoyed. Where are you going? Latham stumbled on. You fool! You don't know these jungles. You'll die in there. You won't last an hour. Latham didn't look back. Penger didn't call again. Latham could almost imagine the man's shrug of indifference. Vision stopped 5 yards away. A soft, gluttonous muck, worse than the outer swamp, tugged at his ankles. Corrupt fungi growth and giant spiked ferns reached far above him in the blanketing fog. Penger was wrong. He wouldn't die in here. Latham knew where he was going. Quilo had told him of the Gabriel village a mere few miles away, where the foothills came down to touch the jungle edge. Quilo and the Jovian had undoubtedly headed for there and planned to lie low for a while. When the time was propitious, they would sneak back to the outpost and make a deal with Penger for the Josmian. The route was long and circuitous, hugging the fringe of jungle. The Gabriels traveled it every day, but Latham had a better plan. By cutting directly through the morass, he might just arrive there ahead of them. He would arm himself somehow and wait. The element of surprise. That's all he could hope for now. He left the gluttonous path. And to his surprise, it wasn't so bad. The growths towered many times higher, but were not so dense. Occasionally the sun evidenced itself against the paling of mists hundreds of feet above. Lusty, primeval odors were almost an opiate to his senses. He plunged on for some 10 minutes before he began to doubt. Gradually the gloom came alive with motion and sound and unseen terrors. He tried to segregate those that might mean danger. There came first a gentle whirring of wings through the mist, sweeping close above him and away. There came a gentle ripple through the foliage beside him, a slither of sound that kept pace endlessly. Was this what Penger meant? Still, Latham had seen nothing. He wished he had his disc gun, though. He wished it desperately, as a heavier sound came nearer. A grayish bulk charged directly across his path. It was monstrous, semi-reptilian, with wings arched sinuously along its spine as it half reared toward him. Latham fell back against a tree bole and stood motionless, staring into glittering feral eyes. The beast coughed raucously and went thrashing back into the welter of jungle and mud. Latham stepped away. His foot caught in a root, and he fell headlong. Instantly, tiny spheres of diaphanous substance showered about his head, to burst in a scatter of violet spores. Those that touched his skin turned instantly blood red and seemed to grow, burrowing deep. Frantically, he pulled them from his flesh, leaving raw, red sores. There was no trail to guide him now, but he did not immediately mind that. He trekked the South Mars Desert, and he had weathered the jungles of Io. To Sith hound or no, he had an unerring instinct for direction. He was sure the foothills couldn't be far ahead, but he must have a weapon. End of section 20.